Hello, everyone. We'll give you a moment, make sure everyone's connected. Great. I'm sure there'll be more folks trickling in. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I am Ashley Sklar, the Adult Services and Community Engagement Consultant with the Connecticut State Library Division of Library Development. Together with my colleague, Kim Poe, who's also here, our Children and Young Adult Consultant. We're really excited to be bringing you more of Growing Equitable Library Services, or GELS. You can find a lot more about GELS and all the programs that have already happened and those to come on our GELS LibGuide. I will be sure to drop links after. And today we are really excited to be kicking off a 4-part series with Dr. Audrey Barbakoff called Building Capacity for Community-Led Libraries. We couldn't be more thrilled to have her here with us. Audrey is the CEO of CoLab Capacity, which provides community-centered consulting for libraries and social good organizations. She has more than a decade of experience in public libraries where she focused on community engagement and leadership. Her innovative and inclusive work has been recognized by Library Journal Movers and Shakers, the Freedom to Read Foundation, among others. In addition to her MLIS, Dr. Barbakoff holds an educational doctorate degree, hopefully I'm saying that right, in organizational change and leadership. Her dissertation focused on building organizational capacity for equity, diversity, and inclusion in public libraries. And she's the author of a forthcoming book, 12 Steps to a Community-Led Library. I have a feeling we'll get to hear some of that content today. A few housekeeping things before I turn it to Audrey in just a moment. If you could update your name, if it's not already your name in library, that would be super helpful for conversation purposes, so we know who's joining us today. Excuse me. Zoom also offers a live captioning feature, so please feel free to use that and adjust that for yourself. You can find all the controls at the bottom of the screen. You can turn it on at the beginning of the webinar now. You also can turn it on and off as we go. If you need it at a certain point, turn it on. If you want it off, turn it off. You have all of the control. We are recording today's session, as you probably noted, and the recording and slides will be made available, although the slides are already available on the GELS LibGuide. So you can see those. We have found that that can be helpful for note-taking purposes and just kind of following along. So please access those as you need. So Kim and I will be here with you. We are going to always keep an eye on the chat. Feel free to add your questions there throughout, as well as your insights, your comments, your ideas, your conversation. We love an active chat, so keep that going. And we, as always, will be following up with you at the end of the session, as well as via email afterwards with our brief survey. Please take a moment to fill it out. We really read them all and take that into account as we keep planning. So with that, I am excited to turn it over to Audrey to get us started.
Thanks so much, Ashley. I'm so thrilled to be here. When Ashley and Kim reached out to me and asked if I would participate in GELS, I was just blown away by the investment that the Connecticut State Library is putting into this whole series. It's an amazing series, the whole GELS piece. So you are so lucky to have these two and their teams and really supporting DEI in the state. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of your fantastic work. So I am going to share a screen now. And we're going to be talking about fundamentals of community-led planning and capacity building. So as Ashley mentioned, this is a 4-part series. So today we're really focused on the fundamentals, the underpinnings of the concrete steps that we're going to talk about later. So today is really, while we will talk about application and we will make it practical, a lot of the focus today is on kind of the big ideas and concepts that underlie a lot of community-led planning work and a lot of capacity building in your organization. So please do keep that chat going. We are going to use some breakout rooms to have some time to talk about what application looks like in your library. I recognize off the bat that not all of you are going to be able to talk. I know some of you are on a service desk, kind of, Kim was saying earlier, of like, one earbud in. So we're going to put you in somewhat larger groups. So if there are a couple of people who can't talk, that's okay. but I still think it will be helpful for you to hear how other libraries are thinking about applying these concepts. So feel free to engage in whatever way works for you throughout. All right. Let's dive in. So what we're going to cover today is why you would want to do community-led planning. And I'm actually going to start with a why before the what, before we get into the really deep of like, what does this actually mean, this phrase, because it's really important to have some shared language and some shared investment, both within this room and for you to take back to your libraries and communities as you're talking about this. So we're really going to focus in on why this kind of approach matters, why it's effective, and why you would want to apply it in your library. So then we'll get into nitty gritty of like, what is this really? What does it mean in a deep way? How does it differ from other forms of community engagement? And we're going to talk about assessing your own library's capacity. Where do you stand now in relation to the various factors that affect your capacity to engage in community-led planning? And then I'm going to introduce you to what we'll be focused on in the next 3 webinars, which is the collab model that I developed during my dissertation, and that is the focus of my forthcoming book, which are the 12 steps or the 12 different methods for building your organizational capacity for community-led planning. So before we get rolling, any questions in the chat? Go ahead and pop them in. I will add that you're very lucky today. I don't always sound like a fabulous lounge singer. So thank you for bearing with me, and apologies in advance if I need to turn my mic off here and there for the moment to cough. Okay, let's just dive right into my favorite topic, which is why this matters so much, why we're here today. And I know that you signed up for this webinar, so you're like, okay, yes, community-led planning, I'm in, let's do this. But it's really important to articulate why this matters. That's important for us to have a really clear, logical understanding, not just kind of like a gut feeling that this is important, but to really be able to articulate why it matters and to be able to express that to others in our organization. Especially if you yourself are not the director or not in senior leadership, you need to be able to talk about this with people in your organization to get buy-in, to make some changes to your approach. So you also need to be able to talk to your potential partners about what you're asking them to do, right? So having this deep understanding of the why that is articulated is really important. So there are 4 really big reasons why you would want to engage in community-led planning. And the first one is in many ways the biggest one, and this is equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice. Your organization may use a different acronym. There's a lot of them out there, but in talking, I will probably just say DEI or EDI. Community-led planning is a method for sharing power with your community. And so you can make an active choice to share that power with the people in your community and the groups in your community who have been systematically denied that power. Okay? You can make a choice to put resources and decision-making authority and visibility right into the hands of people who have been unfairly denied those things. Community-led planning allows you to do this even in the current state of librarianship, which is pretty white, pretty female, pretty able-bodied, right? Not sort of middle-aged, middle class, right? No big surprises there. That oftentimes we don't look like the communities we serve. And so while we work on that, in the meantime too, like what do we do, right? And even if you have a beautifully diverse staff, there is no one staff person who is going to represent every group in your community, right? We have all kinds of folks in our communities, and we're unlikely to ever have, like an exact corollary on staff, and we don't want to tokenize people. So this method allows anyone in your library to think about how to decenter themselves and put some power in the hands of the community members who deserve it most. I really emphasize this for 2 reasons. One is that DEI is likely to be a compelling, right? That it's hopefully something that aligns with your personal values, that almost certainly aligns with the stated values or mission of your organization, that absolutely aligns with the core values of the profession. So it is really clear that if something is a strategy for increasing DEI, then it's important, right? It's something that we need to be working on, thinking about. The other reason I say this is because it is not a given. You can follow the process for community-led work and just center the voices and share power with the people that you're already seeing. And that's easy to do, right? It's easy to work with the people who are loud, who are there, who are putting their hand up and volunteering. And many of them are wonderful partners, right? The museums that you've always, or cultural institutions that we've always worked with, right? The kind of big established organizations, right? The service clubs, your Rotary, your Kiwanis, like whatever it is in your community, right? You have some pillars that are kind of always there. And you have some individual people, right, who are always there, always putting their hand up. And I'm sure they're very wonderful, most of them, all of them, very wonderful. And those are the people who are already using a library and who already have a connection to the library, and who, we are already serving well, right? So it's really important that as you think about community-led planning, community-led programming, whether it's programming or strategic planning or kind of whatever context you're using to apply this space planning, that you really make a concerted effort to say whose voice is systematically excluded, who is not in this room, who is not putting up their hand, right? Who have we not served well in the past? Who are we not designed well to serve? And to make sure that those are the communities that you are being led by. Right, making sure that you are putting them in the center. So that takes intentional effort on your part, and that's why this piece is so important, because it's a lot of the core of why we do this, and it doesn't happen by accident. It requires your intention. Okay, so box off. Next point. The others will be quicker. So the next is relevance, and I've already alluded to this. But community-led planning makes your programs and services and spaces and initiatives incredibly relevant to your library. And not in the way where you have to argue with your great aunt at Thanksgiving who's like, why are libraries still relevant when we have the Google, right? Or the Chat GPT now, I guess. That I think for a long time, libraries have in many ways been on the defensive about we're relevant, we're still relevant, we're here. We're not just some old-fashioned institution. We're serving all these modern needs. And that's true, right? We are, of course, still relevant, but we're on the defensive, kind of arguing that we are all the time, right? Or more often than we'd like to. When you do community-led work, you are out there in the community, helping other people do the things that they already care about and already want to do, and achieve the goals that they already have and the dreams and the visions that they already have. So you don't have to go out and be like, look, the library is relevant, because you're there, you're on the ground, you're doing the work with people. They are seeing you be relevant, right? They are seeing you bring library resources, bring research expertise, bring gathering space, right? Bring digital literacy, bring, instructional design and project planning and program management, and all of these skills that we have. They're seeing you bring those things in the service of what they care about. So you don't have to give them a big long laundry list of here are the 80,000 things that we do, which we're all really good at, right? We're really good at being here's the flyer, here's all this stuff. But actually having people see you in real time in the real world, apply those things to do what they care about, you don't have to say the words, I'm relevant. It's so incredibly obvious. Okay. So community-led planning demonstrates your relevance to your community. And as I mentioned in the DEI piece, it clearly aligns with your organizational values, the professional values that we have. So it's also clearly relevant on that kind of internal strategic side, right? Okay, those are the two kind of more heady, amorphous ones. The next two are pretty concrete. Community-led planning builds relationships, right? So often in a library-led program, we're like, what program should we do? I don't know. Let's see. I like knitting. A lot of people probably like knitting. Let's do a knitting program, right? And then maybe a few people show up, or maybe they don't. And, you know, if no one shows up, I'm like, all right, maybe people don't like knitting. Let's try something else, right? And, you know, there's a place for kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And at some point, it's better to just, you know, try things than do nothing. But what you've missed there, right? And the reason that you don't know ahead of time if those things are going to be successful or not, or if they're going to resonate with people or not, is there's no relationship, right? You're just offering a thing, an activity, a program, right? A new feature in your space, you know, a new policy. Community-led planning, by definition, develops relationships. It is not something you can do by yourself. You wouldn't want to, and it's not possible. So just by doing this, you build relationships, and those relationships are actually the result. They are more important than whatever it is that the concrete thing is that you're trying to plan, right? They're more important than the program. They're more important than the design of the space. They're more important than the strategic plan that you're making. Because relationships endure, but projects end, right? And as your relationships get stronger, first of all, that like, is anyone going to come? Yeah, they are. Because the people you want to serve with the program are the people who planned it. Like, they made it themselves. They've been working on it for 3 months. They're coming. And they're bringing their friends and their family. And their organizations are telling their trusted communities about what you're doing, right? It's not coming from you. It's not you doing the, hey, I'm relevant wave, right? It's someone from within the community saying, I made this thing. It's for us. You better get over here on Saturday, right? It's coming from that trusted source. And from those relationships, you also then get feedback, right? This is working, that's not working. You did this right. Hey, I probably wouldn't have told you this if I didn't know you pretty well and trust you, but frankly, you screwed this up. Right? Like, people aren't going to tell you that kind of thing if they don't trust you, and if you haven't earned their trust. So these relationships are like incredibly powerful in helping you decide what to do, in helping you evaluate what you're doing. Like, at every stage, having these relationships is incredibly important. And so community-led planning is a really effective way of building those relationships and of earning trust. The point that I left for last of the why is actually the one that most people think of first, which is why I put it last, because it is the least important, even though it's the most obvious, but that's resources, right? Capacity. We often go to budget when we think about that. I've never met anyone at the library who's like, we have too much money, you know, like, we don't have enough budget, or we have limitations on our budget, you know, gift of public fund laws, we're not allowed to purchase food in some case, right? Like, every library has kind of their, you know, you can't do a raffle prize, whatever. Libraries have restrictions on how they can use their money. But also, I would say that the biggest limiter in libraries generally is time, right? Is that we have a lot to do. We have service points to cover. We have a lot of different programs and partnerships on, you know, bubbling away at the same time. You get that call from your director that there's this, like, you know, new initiative, and by the way, we're going to be migrating to a new ILS in 3 months. And, you know, it's, you know, I don't have to tell you. The time is so often our limiter, especially because relationships take time. Yeah, Ashley says in the chat, we can always use more hours in the day. Exactly. I can't get you more hours in the day, but I can get you more people to do more stuff in those same hours, right? So when you partner with other organizations, you get other people, right? You just get more human power, like more people who can spend time working on a thing. And that's huge. You know, sometimes that's really what we need to make something feasible. And then the last resource I want to mention, because I think it's sometimes overlooked, is expertise, right? Sometimes as we get into newer areas like, say, health, right? Say, you know, helping a community cope with substance abuse, that, you know, we sort of feel like, oh gosh, we're out of our depth here, right? Or like, I went to library school, I'm not a trained social worker, like, I'm not equipped to answer these questions. Or in like kind of maybe a less fraught way, like, okay, here's someone with some in-depth questions about technology, or some in-depth questions about small business. Like, I don't have an MBA, I don't have a computer science degree, I don't know, right? Of course, you know a lot, but a lot of times we feel obligated to know more, right? To like know as much to be able to actually not just know where to find the answers, which is what we know how to, which is what we're good at, what we're trained to do, right? But like we feel like we have to have the answers, or we have to learn them, and so we end up spending a lot of time and energy going out and kind of like halfway learning something, and then trying to bring it to people and just sort of stay like half a step ahead, right? And that sucks up a lot of your time and capacity and mental space, and honestly probably doesn't really give people the access to the best quality of information, right? So by partnering, by working with community organizations, by centering them and their knowledge, their expertise, we can bring what we're good at and they can bring what they're good at. So we bring the ability to connect people with each other and with resources to find out what's there, right? We bring a space that people in our community, whether it's a public community, whether it's an academic community, whether it's a corporate community, but we bring often a physical space or a virtual space where people can come together. That we can do what we do as librarians, and we can bring in subject matter expertise, like subject matter experts, to do what they do, right? We don't have to be the social workers. We can bring in the social workers, right? You don't have to know how to, the difference between an S Corp and a C Corp and an LLC. You can bring in someone from your SBA or whatever. So we also expand our capacity by bringing in different perspectives, right? Because it's also not just, I've been talking a lot about concrete knowledge because that's easy, but it's also different lived experiences, right? Different perspectives, different histories. So when we work with people who are coming from backgrounds and perspectives and identities and professional trajectories and all these things that are different from ours, then we really expand our capacity in a meaningful way. And there's a question in the chat, is this similar to a version of community asset planning? It absolutely is, and we're going to talk specifically about asset-based community development in a little bit. So I paid Jason to say that, and he's ahead of the curve there. Thanks, Jason. So 4 key reasons: equity, relevance, relationships, capacity. I know that's like a lot, and these are a lot of the big ideas. So any questions or reflections before we move on? Cool. So at this point, we're going to put you in breakout rooms just for a few minutes. And let's say 8. Can we do 8 minutes, Kim? And Kim says in the chat, there is a past GELS workshop on asset mapping. So you'll get like a 5-minute primer from me, but you can get like the real deal from a subject matter expert. There you go, like making those partnerships, really in depth from another webinar. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout rooms for a little over 5 minutes. And again, I'm anticipating that like in your room, at least 2 to 3 people will be able to talk. Right, we'll be in a place where they can talk. So it's okay if you just need to listen in, and or if you can't have your camera or whatever. But I think it's really helpful for you to hear how other people are thinking about this in a practical way, right? Even if you can't talk. So discuss in your breakout room which benefits of community-led libraries. So of those 4, which benefits of community-led planning are most important in your library? And how can you draw a connection between community-led planning and your library, right? That could be your library's mission, vision, values, strategy, goals, kind of whatever structures drive your library. But what I'm asking you to do there really is to sort of say, like, how would you say to your director? Or how would you say, if you are the director, how would you say to your staff, right? To convince them that this is something that it would be meaningful to your library. And because you will not be able to see the slide in the breakout rooms, the questions are also in the chat. Thank you, Ashley, which I think people can still see. Yes? Yeah, yes. Cool. Kim says yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into random breakout rooms for the next 8 minutes.
Okay, so you all have breakout rooms. I'll give you sort of like a 1-minute call back to let you know to sort of wrap up your conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and open those now, and hopefully it works. It always works.
Excellent. Welcome back. I was able to lurk in a conversation or two, so they sounded really wonderful. Would anyone just like to share a takeaway or something that was talked about in your room, something from you or something from one of your colleagues that really, that really stuck out to you? And you can just unmute or you can pop things in the chat. Oh, Jane has a hand up. Go ahead.
Hi. So this was what I added from my experience, which is that it's just so easy to think I know what kind of programming, what kind of new program this library needs, and without finding out, is it relevant? Do people want it? And so this would help me correct, I think, the proclivity to keep doing that.
That's such a great point. It stops us from making assumptions. Yeah. And I'll go further and say, you probably do know your community pretty well, and you're probably right about, generally the kinds of programs that people might want. At least the people that you already have a connection with, right? The people you're already seeing. You're not necessarily wrong. And it will be so much stronger if you do those things with community partners, right? Who are invested in it, who help shape it, who want to come to it because they help to make it, right? And who want to spread the word about it. And it can really shape the nuance of how you do a program. So actually, I'm going to give an example. I did a program, that our Spanish language specialist came to me, and I was overseeing at the library I was at the time, the small business related programs, among other things. And she said, hey, for Hispanic Heritage Month this year, I want to do something celebrating, Latinx small business owners. Right? We have a lot of those in our community. I want to focus on that. What should we do? I said, I don't know. Let's ask some people who are Latinx small business owners. And so we started reaching out to people in the community and just said, hey, we want to do something. We know the month we want to do it in, and we know that we want it to be about small business. That's it. What should we do? And do you want to be part of it? So we ended up doing a program, right, that was during Hispanic Heritage Month and was for and by and about small business. Like the type of program didn't, the topic didn't massively shift, but the way we did it was completely different, right? It was an all ages program. People were like, look, we're bringing our kids, we're bringing our families. Like, this is an all ages thing, like, we're not coming if, I don't have childcare. It's not the cultural thing to like leave your kids and go to something. If you're only allowing adults, I'm not coming. So we had a kids activity in the space. We had this fantastic little program making alebrijes, which are like monsters, basically like sort of folkloric monsters out of like toilet paper rolls. So the kids were making these little puppets and then running around playing with them. It was great. We had food. It's like, it's got to be a party. We were going to do it on a Sunday morning, and they were like, A, I'm in church on Sundays, so no. And B, if you do anything before 11 a.m., I'm not coming. So it was like, we changed the time, we changed the format, we changed the activities that we ended up doing. I won't go into all the detail about like all the ways that we changed it, but it was a completely different type of event than I would have planned. Right? So even if you are totally right on about what your community wants, the way they want it, so that it's culturally responsive, so that it's happening in ways that are meaningful to people, so that it supports, their ability to come and their interest, like that stuff can really shift really radically. And the how can shift really radically, even if the what is pretty much the same. So thank you. That was a really great point to raise. All right. So now let's get into the nitty gritty of like, what is community-led planning? You're on board, you're sold, we're doing this. What are we doing exactly? So, and I think that the clearest way that I've found to explain this is through the spectrum of public participation. And this comes from an organization called IAP2, or the International Association of Public Participation. And something I said earlier on, just like my one sentence definition, right, of community-led planning is that community-led planning is a way of sharing power with your community. And so this really this spectrum gives you the specifics of what that means and how that looks. So these, all the steps on the spectrum here, these are different ways that you can engage with your community. Like when we say community engagement or outreach, those words can mean so many different things to so many different, like to different people in different contexts, right? They're very fuzzy. So this allows us to disambiguate. So starting on the left is the least level of engagement, and all the way to the right is your highest level of engagement. So your least level of engagement is inform, right? Book club happens at 3 p.m. on Tuesday. Right? This is not bad, right? This is not like things on the left are bad and things on the right are good. This is about naming the kind of engagement that you're doing. So letting people know what's going on is important. If people do not know when book club is, they are not coming to book club, right? Like letting people know what's going on is important. There's absolutely a place for that. What we want to do is make sure that we're intentionally matching the level of engagement to the outcome that we want, right? If you want really deep engagement from people, but all you're doing is like, here's our flyer, guess what? Right? You're not getting deep engagement. So the next two, I'll lump together a little bit as I talk about this, are consult and involve. And I find that libraries tend to live really comfortably in this space. These are where we ask people for their input, but we at the library retain all of the power to make decisions. So this is like going to a potential partner or to a community leader or to a regular patron or just to anyone in your community and say like, hey, you know, what kind of program do you think we should do? Or here's the survey after the program. Like, what did you think? What should we do more of? What should we do next time? Right? We ask for input, and that's great, but we don't share the decision-making power, right? We don't share our resources. We don't put anything in the hands of other people to make decisions. So community-led planning really lives in the space of these last two, collaborate and empower. And this is where power is either shared 50-50, sort of the collaborate, like a true equal partnership, and empower is really where you are letting go, right? You are saying the library is a platform, right? And that comes from the Aspen Institute dialogue on libraries, this idea of library as platform. But you know, the library is a set of resources that are at your disposal to help you accomplish the things that you care about. Now, this does not mean like throw your hands up, right? Like, well, library's out, like, here you go, here's some stuff, see ya, right? This is about saying we are here actively as your supporters, right? You have this thing you want to accomplish. You are the ones best positioned to achieve your own goals, address the issues that are affecting you, right? You don't need some nice white ladies to like swoop in and try to solve your problems for you, right? You know what needs to happen. There are already people out in your community doing incredible work, right? And this is about lifting them up. So saying, hey, you're doing this amazing stuff, but because we live in a systematically unfair society, right? We live in a systemically inequitable country, world, environment, right? That the work that you are doing has not been given the visibility and the resources that it really deserves. And then it requires in many cases to be truly successful. So the library can help rebalance those scales. We can say, okay, we have space. We have staff who can support you. We have access to information and sources of knowledge. We know other people in the community who are interested in similar things, and we can bring you together, right? We can expand your capacity. Because you're a little tiny nonprofit with 3 staff members and you don't have time to get out there and map the community, right? So really, that's giving over, saying like, we have these resources that we can share with you, but you make the decision. You decide what program we'll do. You decide how it happens. You decide how this budget gets spent. You decide how this space gets used. We're here to help. We're here to advise. We're here to smooth the way. But the power is yours, right? Was that like a Captain Planet thing? The power is yours. That was so cheesy. Oh my God. Okay, I need to think of a better way to say that. But like that, the power to actually make decisions about what happens and how resources get used lives with the community. So fundamentally, that's what community-led planning is. And I think even though that's sort of abstract, it's really important because every community-led program looks a little bit different, right? Because you're in a unique context. You're working with a community, with an organization that doesn't exist anywhere else, right? And that might be different from what it was like last year or what it'll be like next year, right? Every community-led planning process is in a unique relational context, and so the outcomes are totally unique. And the outcomes are unexpected, right? Because you're handing over power, you can't know exactly what's going to happen. All right, so I want to give you another tool related to this. I guess to finish that thought, you need to understand the underlying principle because you can't just count on the outcome looking a specific way, right? That's why it's important. So I want to give you a really fun tool, and I didn't make this the main slide because it's too hard to read. Like it's just a lot of text. But I think this is really helpful for people in sort of understanding what this means. So I'm giving it to you so you can look at it later. This is the Hennepin County Library set up a series of examples around the spectrum of public participation about making a decision about what to have for dessert. So like informing is like, we're having cherry pie for dessert, right? And empower is like, you know, I will give you some money to go buy the ingredients to get dessert. So it just gives you like a concrete example, which I think can be helpful. So I'm just giving this to you for later. I will add that this is not the only spectrum that is out there. I've kind of been toying with building my own model that brings together a bunch of different ones, but I don't have that ready to roll yet. So I do want to mention some of the other pieces that live in other spectra, just for your consideration. And I think the important thing is that there are other spectra that widen this. There are things on either end. Youth services folks, and there's something called Hart's ladder of youth participation. I think it's kind of old, so the terminology might be a little funky, but it's something to that effect. It's called Hart's ladder. And what's important is that it has 3 rungs below this that are doing harm. Am I getting ahead of myself here? Oh, okay. That are doing harm. It has marginalization, tokenization, and ignoring. Right. And so I won't get into each of those in detail and their relationship to each other, but they're essentially the broken rungs at the bottom of the ladder. And they are, I think, an important reminder that if you try to engage people in a way that is only for your own benefit, right, that is just to make the library look good and that is performative, you can actually do harm, right? If you are tokenizing the populations that you're trying to work with, right? If instead of really centering them, you're just kind of having people there as decoration and not truly sharing any power, you are hurting your relationships. So it's important to not fall off the bottom, basically, of this, right? And to recognize that it is possible to do harm if you are insincere. The other ways is that there are some that sort of go further than empower. There's a spectrum model that uses defer to as the highest level, which I think is more clear in its meaning than empower, right? It's much more about like emphasizes that giving up, giving over, right? That you really are, you're doing something hard, but I think empower can be kind of buzzwordy and we're like, we're empowering people. And that sounds nice. But deferring to, I think, is recognizing that like you're giving up control and that's hard. And a lot of the things that we are going to need to do in order to build organizational capacity to do this work is about addressing the fact that we have to radically change our expectations of what success looks like and about how much control we have and about, you know, what our outcomes might be. That's where a lot of the difficulty in this work stems from, is that it changes the picture of what we're going for, right? It changes where the goalposts are. Okay, before we move on, any questions about, thank you, Kim put a link to Hart's ladder, the ladder of children's participation. There we go, Hart's ladder of children's participation. And she put that in the chat. Any questions about the spectrum of public participation? All right, I'm going to drop another heavy theory on you, and then pretty soon we'll get back to doing some breakout rooms so you can process. So I'm going to talk really briefly about asset-based community development. There are a lot of theories and frameworks and concepts that are related to community-led planning, like trauma-informed service, ACEs. Again, if you're on the U side, you might have heard that. There are a lot of different frameworks that you're going to see really related, or you're going to hear similar language. But what I want to talk about specifically is asset-based community development, because this is so fundamental. It is really an underlying assumption of community-led work. And asset-based community development essentially means, and of course, GELS already did a trauma-informed learning thing, because you all are amazing. You've already done everything, and it's in the chat. So asset-based community development, fundamentally what this says is everyone has strengths. People have strengths and assets, and that when we approach them, it is not as white saviors, right? It is not as like solving people's problems for them, or I know better. It's that like getting away from that kind of like yucky, paternalistic, kind of colonial view of helping, right? That's really embedded in a lot of helping and service professions. And instead saying, you're awesome, and it is a privilege for me to be allowed, right, to be trusted to work with you. And when you approach people in that way, it really shifts the conversation, right? You're not approaching partners as like, what are your needs? What are your problems? How can I help you solve them? Or how can I come up with solutions for you? It's like, you have strengths, you have gifts, you know what needs to happen. And my job is just to be your cheerleader, your supporter, and to provide you with equitable access to resources. Right? So when you approach people from this asset-based perspective, what you're really fundamentally doing is approaching them with respect, right? And saying you're not just a hole of needs that needs to be filled. You're a whole person, you're a whole community, and you're amazing. And I want to partner with you as a way of like, it is a benefit to me to get to partner with you, right? Like I am learning from and gaining from you. So some of the principles of asset-based community development are everyone has gifts, everyone cares about things, right? Everyone has a passion. Asking and listening are more powerful than telling, right? When you come with this asset-based perspective, it's not about me being like, here's all the stuff the library can do for you. Like, yes, that can come into the conversation at some point. People need to, at some point as you're planning together, people need to know what you can bring. But it's much more about learning from the people that you're trying to, you're approaching to work with. So you really take on just naturally when you approach people with this perspective of everyone has strengths and gifts and passions. You want to ask, right? You want to learn. You want to listen in a really deep way. Similarly, a result of this approach is that everyone has agency and shares ownership. So unlike this traditional model of like, you have needs and I have assets and I give them to you, right? What it's saying is we all have ownership. We all have a piece of the puzzle, right? There's not like a giver and a taker in this situation. We're all in this together. We're all bringing different strengths, different assets, different viewpoints, and that's what's going to make it work, right? Like we are, I don't want to say like equal or level, but like we're all contributors. We all have ownership and we all get agency and power. So that again is like a super fast, very cursory intro to ABCD, but I just to have that fundamental perspective of approaching people as having strengths and assets, right? As a basic form of respect, basically. Okay, so now let's take all of this heady theory and make it real. So I want to ask you, we'll go back into breakout rooms. I want to ask you to think of something that you did at your library that was meant to serve your community, whatever kind of community you serve, right? And it could be any kind of thing, a program, a service, an initiative, a policy, a change to your space, right? It doesn't matter what the thing is. But think of something that you did to respond to or serve your community. And I want you to talk about how it relates to these theories, to the spectrum of public participation. So some examples, you might discuss where did that fall on the spectrum, right? Where did you just, did you consult people? Like, did you get their opinion? Or, were you empowering people and really giving them power, right? Was that the right choice, right? Did that align with what you want to accomplish? And how might the outcome have been different if you moved right left or right on that spectrum? So kind of just thinking holistically about something that you did recently to respond to the community and how it lines up with the spectrum. And then what are some areas in which you might be able to move towards a more community-led approach in your library, right? Where do you see some opportunity, some space, some practical space for movement, right, in your own library in this direction? Make sense? All right, let's.
How many minutes would we like?
Yeah, let's do 8 again. All right, welcome back. I know those times for discussion, like these are big questions with just a few minutes, but is there anything that folks want to share? Something that you shared or that someone in the room shared with you that you just, that really resonated with you? And you're welcome to unmute or you can share in the chat. Let's try to hear one takeaway from somebody. You can put a hand up if you would like. All right, well, we'll let people reflect in the chat as we go on. I know there's like a lot of nuance to those conversations, so it's hard to sum them up briefly. So, you know, moving ahead, we've talked about kind of what are the big underlying ideas here? Why would you do this? What does it really mean to do community-led work? And I know some of the conversations that I sat in, and I was already hearing some of this about like what starts to come home are the realities of your organization as you think about applying these, right? That this sounds like it's going to take some time. It sounds like it might take some budget. You know, I have a board or a director or a manager who is, you know, going to be resistant to this or has been resistant to this for a variety of reasons, right? But there are a lot of potential capacity blockers in the organization. And this is actually the area that I focused my research in, because I was like, we know how to do community-led work, right? Like my favorite tool on like, how do you do community-led work? Like kind of your step 1, step 2 came out almost 20 years ago, I think. It's the Working Together project that came out of Canada, Coalition of Libraries in Canada, put out a toolkit. And it's fantastic. And so like 20 years later, why aren't we doing everything this way, right? Like there are other things. It's not just about knowing how to do it. It's about having organizations that are set up for it, right? So what are those blockers? They're clearly there. They exist. What are we going to do about them? So I want to talk about how you can think about what that looks like in your organization. So as I did my research, I really found that there were kinds of two models, right, of what an organization with low capacity for community-led work looks like, and what an organization with high capacity for community-led work looks like. No organization is like all in bucket A or bucket B, right? It's not that linear, but I think having sort of two models, two visualizations just kind of gives you a way of thinking more concretely about where your organization falls. And you'll notice that these are not about organizational structure. It's not about do you have a dedicated position or don't you or whatever. What it's really about is about how your library thinks about its relationship to the community. So what I would see in libraries where the capacity is limited, where you have like a librarian or a couple of librarians or a department, right? Or like sort of a small isolated individual or group, right? Depending on the size and structure of your system, who is like really into this, right? And is doing great work, but is getting burned out, right? And doesn't feel like the rest of their organization gets it. So imagine the librarian standing in the middle of that Venn diagram between the circles of the library and the community, the library's goals and the community's goals. And that librarian is pulling as hard as they can to try to get those circles to overlap as much as possible, right? And to like hold on to that area of overlap and do programming and planning and services and like to do work in that little overlap space, right? And that takes their muscles, right? They're constantly having to like work and push to make the library and the community see their areas of intersection and work in their areas of intersection, right? That is a recipe for burnout. And it's a recipe for low capacity because you're really dependent on like 1 or 2 people, right? Or a small number of people to like kind of make this happen. And all the knowledge is in their heads and all the relationships are, you know, with them as individuals, and like everything is so dependent on them. And when they invariably basically burn out, those two circles of library and community just kind of like roll away from each other again, right? Like down the opposite sides of the mountain. So there's no real organizational capacity. It's really like a person's capacity, right? A librarian's capacity. In a high capacity organization, instead of seeing those circles, there's still the three circles, right? We still have three circles, but they're arranged differently. So instead of having the library and the community as kind of like separate spheres, what we do is we see, and this is of course from the perspective of the librarian. So the library is in the center, the librarian is in the center, but what we see instead is more like an eye that dilates, right? That the work of the librarian contributes to the goals of the library, which contribute to the goals of the community. And as the community achieves its goals, the library achieves its goals, and the librarians achieve their goals, right? So now it's like these circles, instead of fighting each other, are supporting each other, right? Are expanding, are dilating each other's capacity. So what's changed isn't like, you still are thinking of your elements of, right, the library as organization, the staff as humans, and the community, you know, as a community. But instead of seeing these all as like separate entities that are like forced to try to, like, that are kind of fighting for priority, if you really see them as deeply aligned, as the goals of the library are the goals of the community, right? Then you've massively grown your capacity because you can reach outside yourself, right? And instead of just like, oh my gosh, we have to do this community-led work over here, but I also have 75 things to do over there, and this is just one more thing, right? It's like, this is how we do all of our work. This is our approach, right? This is our fundamental approach to work, rather than like an extra thing that we do. So I share that because I think that that's, you know, that's a really important way to think about, like, what is your perspective? What is your organization's perspective? It's not necessarily the same all through your organization, right? Your department, your branch, your whatever, right? It might be different. So there are some specific factors that contribute to these higher low capacity models. So one is, who holds knowledge about community-led work? In my research, I found that it didn't matter if there was a dedicated position or not. I talked to people in all kinds of different sized libraries, all kinds of different organizational structures. It didn't matter. But it mattered a lot if people saw this as everyone's work or one person's work, right? Regardless of like, what's your job description. So in a low capacity organization, you know, if one person would know how to do this, or one department would have the responsibility for doing this, right? Like, you're the community-led people, you do that, you're over there. Whether or not that was like your formal job title or your formal department, like, those folks got very siloed, right? But when it was like, everyone needs to understand these basic ideas, everyone needs to understand this approach because this is how we work, this is how we serve community, this impacts every job, right? Not that everyone needs to like be able to take, you know, a specific program from like inception to, you know, full completion, but like that everyone in the organization needs kind of a shared understanding of what we're doing here, like of what this means. When that was shared, then organizations had really high capacity, right? People were able to support each other, to speak the same language, right? To work together, to share their own experiences and their own assets, right? Regardless of what your job title is, but, you know, your own connections, your own networks, your own perspectives, right? You're able to bring that to the work because you understand what's going on. And it's not just like, I check out books and that person over there does the community-led stuff. Right? There's a question from Becky that I don't understand. One person in the library or more in the library? Becky, can you clarify that a little, or unmute and say a little bit more about what you're asking?
Actually, I kind of think you answered it as I was typing, because it's that look that it's one person in the library who's doing all the outreach and everybody else is just being a librarian at their desk.
Yeah,
and that's what I was asking, is that, so when you put the librarian in the center, that's just me, and the rest of the library goes on, and then and everybody else is pulling in every direction.
Yeah, and that's correct, right?
You did answer that.
Like, that's really hard. Yeah. it might not be a single individual. Like sometimes maybe there's like a department that where like, you know, you've got 5 people who like really get it and are really doing this, but the rest of the system isn't, right? So it doesn't have to be a single person, but this idea that it's isolated, right? That it's like someone else's work. Yeah. Mindset is also really important here. Fixed versus growth mindset. This is doing something pretty new. It's very relationship-based work. It's relationship-based work with people who ideally you do not have relationships with yet and who have very different identities and lived experiences from you. Stuff's gonna go pear-shaped sometimes. Like, you know, you have to expect that you won't be good at everything in the beginning and that you're gonna learn, right? And be open to learning and change. So having that like fixed mindset of like, I can't fail, right? If my one program doesn't go well, like I'm never trying this again, right? Into like seeing the whole thing as a learning process. That's really essential. How success is defined. In low capacity organizations, we stayed really tied to outputs. How many people came to the program? How many programs did we do? Right? In really successful organizations, ideally the outcomes are defined by the community. The community itself decides what success looks like. Or success is actually defined by the process. Like, how did that relationship building go? Right? Did we engage people we'd never engaged before? Did we connect with people in a new way? Did we learn something new? Right? And less about the concrete result, the output. In lower capacity organizations, well, there were a few cases where the leadership was like actively hostile. In a lot of cases, it was just kind of that siloing again, right? The leadership was just like, whatever, someone over there is doing that. I don't really get it. Have at it, you know. Whereas in high capacity organizations, leadership is really engaged and supportive. Culture. In lower capacity organizations, the culture is very traditional, very hierarchical, very exclusionary, right? Librarians with MLIS degrees do this work, and you know, people who do not have the appropriate credentials or positions do that work, and never the twain shall meet, and like stay in your lane. Whereas high capacity organizations are really inclusive and based on learning. So of course, people still have jobs and still have roles. And of course, you should not ask people to consistently work above their pay grade without compensating them, right? That's a real equity issue. But that the culture is a space where everyone's ideas are welcome, where everyone's perspectives and identities are welcome, where it's like, it's not like, oh my God, you're in this role, you know, you can't possibly suggest a partner, you can't possibly suggest a program, or right, that everyone is really welcome to contribute, and that everything is seen as a learning process, right? So it's okay to fail. Staff time focus, that staff are given, instead of just time to like do very concrete things like plan a program, they are given time to do things without a clear outcome, such as building relationships, right? When you build a relationship, you don't know if you're going to get a program out of it or not, right? And then the librarian role, again, instead of rigidly defined and siloed, the librarian has a lot of autonomy and flexibility. And when I say librarian in the broadest sense of the word, I don't care if you have a degree or whatever, or if your title is something else, but you know, that librarians were empowered to, you know, adjust their schedules, adjust where they worked, make commitments on behalf of the library, right? You don't have to check back with your manager for every little thing. So the important thing to think about here is, like, we've now sort of highlighted maybe some of the ways that you're having problems with it. But when you build capacity for community-led work, you're really building capacity for your whole library, that this work builds capacity for itself, right? Because as you transition from that low capacity model to that high capacity model, you are gaining more resources, right? You're gaining more support. You're gaining more focus so that you're not as scattered and trying to do 20 million things, right? When you start to do this work, it's going to build on itself. The more, you know, if you can do a little bit of it successfully, that builds you some capacity, and you can do a little more and a little more and a little more. So it's okay to start small. Doing the work itself builds capacity for the work.
I just want to jump in really quick because I know we're getting kind of close to the end of our time together. 2 questions came in. 2 questions came in that I wasn't sure if you caught. The first one is sort of saying that we learned a lot about the why, but not much about the how. And I know that this 4-part series was advertised as like today would be about the why, like the why and what CoLab is and what CoLab isn't. And there are 3 other sessions. One, I'm not sure if Jenna's question is kind of going to be filtered out through those other 3 sessions, while today is just focusing on the what and the why. And then Jason has another question too that I just kind of wanted to draw attention to, because I don't want us to run out of time before some of these questions are addressed. So I will let you decide how and when we should answer those though.
Thank you. So let's see, Jason asked, is this essentially the library as a community organizer? How do we basically help to improve society through facilitating knowledge creation and community building in our communities? It's a great question. And it is what we'll be grappling with through the rest. Like, I think that is also a sort of a, what does this mean in practice question? So what I think I'll do, so we have a little more time to focus on that, is I'm going to skip the discussion piece here. I'll just ask you to reflect for yourselves on how much capacity does your library have for community-led work now? Right, thinking of those domains that we went through, who holds knowledge, mindset, leadership support, org culture, roles, things like schedules, how success is defined and measured. Like, think about where your library falls in those domains, and think about where you might be able to start growing your library's capacity most easily, right? Like, where do you have some wiggle room, like politically, right? Just like, what's realistic in your organization? Where might you be able to start? I will ask you to just like reflect on that, and feel free to pop some things in the chat if you would like to. But I'm going to move into talking about what's actually in the collab model. And I don't, didn't include all 12 of the steps, but I will tell them to you. So collab is essentially, how do you do this? Like, it's really important to establish these foundations because it really is the theory that empowers you to do this work. It's not just abstract, it is essential for the how, right? And you'll see that as we get into it. But there are 12 concrete steps that I identified in research that libraries can take to increase their capacity. And those are divided up into 3 phases: inspirational change, transformational change, and operational change. Inspirational change, I like a planting metaphor here, in that it's really tempting to jump right to the operational stuff, to be like, okay, let's change how we schedule people, right? But just like we have started off here with the kind of deep stuff, right, rather than the practical stuff, I promise you the deep stuff is the practical stuff. So like these first 2 phases are really about enriching the soil, right? You can take a seed and stick it in the ground, but if you have not done the work to build the soil up, you're going to get a weird little plant, right? Like, that doing this sort of underlying culture work in your organization is incredibly essential. So I will urge you not to jump straight to those operational changes unless you're feeling like your organization has a lot of the underpinnings already in place, because otherwise we make these operational changes and they don't stick. Right? Because people are just like, why are we doing this? Why did we make this random change? I don't get it. Like, it doesn't connect to anything. Why is administration making me do this? Like, and it flops. Okay, so 12 steps. The middle stage, that transformational change, which is essentially culture change, is the big one. So the 12 steps, and we're going to talk about each one of these. That's what we're going to do over the next, the next 3 webinars, or each one of these phases. Set clear expectations around DEI for the organization, right? Because we've talked about how important this work is for DEI. Step 2, train for understanding, or educate for understanding instead of training for procedure, right? That what people really need to do the work is foundational concepts, because the application always looks different, right? So what you need to understand is why you're doing what you're doing so that you can be flexible. Step 3, make a clear connection to core values. Right? Be able to talk about this work in connection to DEI, in connection to your library's mission, vision, values. So those are kind of like, if those 3 things are in place, and a lot of those are about leadership, like this is kind of about getting your leadership on board. If that's in place, your life is a lot easier, right? You don't necessarily have to have all of those in place, but like if you can start with any of those, your road will be smoother. Next is transformational change, and this is basically culture shift in your library. Foster a growth mindset. We'll talk about that in a lot more detail. Develop psychological safety to support a culture of inclusive innovation. Psychological safety is a really rich concept coined by Amy C. Edmondson, basically making it a safe space for people to share and bring divergent ideas and to bring their whole identity, right? Is huge. Oh, Kim, did you just share? Is that a Simon Sinek video on the Start With Why? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, in another one of my trainings.
Awesome. Make time and space for reflection. Prioritize interpersonal skills and cultural humility. Apply prior knowledge, and that's about learning that you know more about how to do this work than you think you do because of experiences that you've had in your life outside of libraries and possibly outside of work. And then build community through relationships, or build community knowledge through relationships. That statistics are fine, but talking to people is really how you build deep community knowledge. And that gets into kind of like the asset mapping piece. So for those of you who had an interest in asset mapping, that's where we'll talk about it. So then we move into operational change. And this is the concrete stuff. This is like, once you've done those other things, once you have a culture that is supportive of these changes, then you can make these like sort of top level operational changes and have them actually work, right? And have them be sustainable. Giving staff time and authority to build relationships. That means things like flexible schedules, right? Flexible work locations, not just being like, hey, you're off desk from 10 to noon on a Thursday, but like empowering staff to be where the community already is and to make commitments on behalf of the library. Step 11 is making it everyone's work. That gets back to that, like in that low to high capacity, right? One of those key points was, is this just a siloed thing that some people over there do, or do we all have a role in it? This is about making sure everyone has a role in it. And then the last step is measuring success through relationships. So getting away from that strictly output-based, attendance-based, like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much did you like this program, satisfaction metrics, and really into understanding and having everyone in the organization understand success in a deeper, more meaningful way that aligns with how the community defines success. So that is the teaser of what we will be talking about in the next 3 webinars. And now you see why it's 3 webinars, because like I could, you know, we could talk for an hour about each of those things. I'm not gonna lie, I wrote like 200 pages on this. I could talk for a lot longer on each of those things, but I won't bore you to death. This is why my mother still calls me up and says, what did you write your dissertation about again? What is your doctorate in now? So this is the sneak peek of what we'll be doing in the next session. So in our last few minutes, let's just do this as a large group. To just type into the chat if you can. What is something from today that felt particularly important or meaningful to you? Or what's a question that you're still grappling with, or something that challenged you? Or just, you know, what's a question that you hope to have answered in the rest of the series? So let's go ahead and share those reflections. You can type in the chat or you can unmute. No one is taking anything away from this, and you are just, you're actually all on desk. Okay, oh, here we go. Reframing what success looks like. Yeah. Building this as an all staff mindset and not just for one person to do. That takes good leadership though. It does. It does. And if your positional leaders, your, you know, people in positions of authority are not taking on that leadership, we will talk about what you can do, right? How you can be that leader from any position. Anything else? Takeaways, remaining questions. I'm intrigued by the thought of process librarianship. I think about process art and how that looks different than prescribed art. That is very interesting. I know nothing about process art, and I'm not even entirely sure what that means, but I'm very excited to go look it up in 3 minutes.
Children's librarian talk. Kathy Potter coming through for the win. I'm with you, Kathy. I know exactly what you're saying, and I think you're right on board.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Kim. I heard that process, focused on process, and I immediately went to process art. Process art is where you get the tools and that you just get to explore how they work together And, you know, you don't come out with a specific project, but it's whatever is made.
Love it. That is an excellent metaphor. Yeah, you're right on. We're right on. And I'm really excited to go like down this rabbit hole and go learn more about process art. Needing to bring the board on board, yeah, to bring it all together with staff involvement. Yeah, absolutely. That's a challenge, can be a challenge. Workplace or governance hierarchies, barriers or obstacles. They can be, and they can be hacked to be on your side, right? Like every organization has a structure. I know every structure has its pros and cons. So like, you know, I have yet to discover structural utopia, but we will definitely talk about how your organizational structure can work for you. Yeah. Focus on bottom-up change, but what about the reverse for a leader on how to bring folks along who feel all is well, don't embrace change? That's a great question, Chris. And if you are in that position, you are in a very good one, because basically steps 1 through 3 are all about what you can do as a leader to make this shift in your organization. I mean, actually, a lot of my research focused on leaders and what leaders can do, but I also recognize that a lot of people who are participating are not in those roles. So I will try to give it from both perspectives, but do know that absolutely, if you are in a leadership or an authority, like a position of authority, and you have this perspective, you are in you're in a more powerful place than you think to influence the culture of your organization. All right, we are at time. Thank you all so much. You'll see in the slides, I'll just flash it up there. You know, there's some further reading, some shameless self-promotion in there for my book coming out later in the year. And here is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out at any time. I'm happy to chat with anyone. Thank you so much.